Montana. She's the Assistant Dean and the Chief Student Affairs Officer at Montana State University, which is actually Great Falls College of Technology. She can explain all that.
Okay.
And she has about 22 years of higher education experience. So if everyone just welcome Judy. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Misty. I'm confined up here, so I'm going to try not to screech your ears out by walking underneath the speakers. Thank you for coming. I appreciate so much, especially the faculty who are here, because summer is always kind of tight, and we want to be out in the lovely weather instead. And so thanks for coming. I'll just kind of tell a little bit, and if you have other questions to know anything about me, please ask. I have been in higher ed for 22 years. I didn't start out that way. I started out in a small little country school as a teacher of 13 lovely little children in Boerne, Montana, which is on the Tongue River just north of Sheridan, Wyoming, and I had a wonderful time there, and if I could stay in country schools, I think I would have probably stayed in that environment for a long time. Then I wanted to rejoin my husband, who was clear across the state in Missoula, so I didn't stay there in Boerne, but went home, and soon we had children, and I did some private tutoring, and I worked in special ed in the Missoula schools a little bit, and then had a private tutoring business, and sort of through some board work, fell into the community college arena, which was at that time called Vocational Technical Centers in Montana. And I was telling people earlier, I met my first student who was a diesel mechanic, and he needed help with his math. And I fell deeply in love with community college students that day, and have never fallen out of love with them. I have a deep respect for students who come back to school, or they are from a family that didn't go to school, to college, and the perseverance that they have, and the stepping into the unknown that I think all of us who have done something really brave have felt, and it's a visceral thing. And so I just admire those students who walk on our campuses and make it through the door, and then join us, because we know our arms are open and welcoming, but they don't know that before they meet you. So that's what's exciting to me every day in higher ed. So I worked for 15 years in Helena, Montana at what was first called the Helena Vocational Technical Center. A few years later it was the Helena Technical Center, and then it became Helena College of Technology, and all these different things. And now it's called Helena College And so there's names of things in Montana. It doesn't even, it's not worth discussing, because it's not that interesting. But so I was there for 15 years. I joined the college in 1990 when the ADA was new, and there was a big change in Carl Perkins' funding strategies. And so I was asked to come in and handle the Carl Perkins funding stream, to turn it into more of a student services model. Before that, it had been funding mostly the technical program equipment. And so I did that, and I set up disability services at the college. And I had the wonderful experience of being able to kind of just, because nobody there understood any of the stuff that I was doing, and so they kind of said, you seem to be doing okay. And as I said earlier in student services, as long as I wasn't asking for more money for myself, I could do just about anything I wanted to. So I set up advising programs, and I set up the other things that I mentioned, and a learning center, and all sorts of student support systems, and gathered the community in. We brought the adult basic ed program into our cadre of supports for students. Our students could go and do some of their developmental coursework with the adult ed program in town for free if they wish to, or as a credit class, and we would contract with them to teach some of those. So that was an early collaboration that was very successful, and used to some extent still today. And Then I had an opportunity to do a short little job with the Job Training Partnership Act, which was called Disability Navigation. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it was really going out and developing capacity for people who are on Social Security disability to get back into the workforce or education, whatever they could do. And I did that for a year, and then had an opportunity to go to work for the college I work for now, but in Bozeman, Montana, where they were setting up some 2-year programs and a physical 2-year presence on the big university campus. So that was an exciting time, and that's where I met Dr. Schaefer, and he was doing some of the workforce pieces of that, and I did the academic pieces and support systems. And so that was fun for a year, and then they moved on to a permanent position and kind of a solidifying of that presence there. And I had the opportunity to apply for and get the position I hold now, which is the first student affairs officer that they've had at the college. And they did some reorganization of administrative duties at the college and found that they needed a student affairs officer, and that's what I came in to do. So I have had an odd career of one that I've never had a job that anyone else did before me. I've always built it myself, and so there's been tremendous freedom in that, and I have enjoyed every minute. And it's provided a very exciting career for me. And then personally, I have been married for 32 years to a wonderful father of 3 children, and they are an interesting group of people. My son is 31 and he's a musician, and so he lives in a van. I always say he's homeless, but he really isn't. He does have a van. And he's actually playing up in Nebraska right this week in Gering, Nebraska. So yeah, he comes down. He's played in Cheyenne before, and so that's kind of fun. And then 2 daughters. One is in Pennsylvania. She's our youngest, and she's pregnant with our first grandchild, so we're very excited about that. And another daughter who is a Spanish teacher in Missoula at a community school, and then in the summer she works at a high-end fly fishing ranch that probably none of us in here can afford to go to, but she has a great time, and that's the fun that she has in the summer. She's a real outdoors fabulous girl. So that's my, and I have 2, as I said, aging Labrador retrievers, and so they stay home with us. So with that, I wanted to just open that up. Is that okay to questions or discussion or anything else that people have?
I'm Sharon with the SAGE TRIO program.
Yes.
There are a handful of academic programs currently reporting to the Dean of Business, Agriculture, and Computer Technology. The organizational audit strongly suggests that these programs be realigned under the Student Services Division, though some of us wish to remain under the Instructional Division. If you're selected for the Vice President of Student Services, what will be your stance on this realignment? Would you support these programs remaining under instruction, or how will you integrate academic support programs into student services while maintaining the strong faculty and instructional division support essential for these programs?
That's a really great question, and one that I've kind of lived every day of my career. When I was in Helena, and I pretty much oversaw all of the academic support programs, about half of my tenure there I reported through the academics, and about half of the time I reported through student affairs. And it made no difference to my job or my work with students, because the function was what I was about, and I will report to whoever you want me to report to. And so that really didn't matter. And that's probably because the relationship between student affairs and academic affairs was a solid one. So knowing that, that's what I would tell you is if it's better to be aligned under student services, I can see some real reasoning behind aligning academic support systems under student services, but I think it really needs to happen above that to make that be an easy transition for those programs. I think the up to the vice president level, that if the vice presidents can, as I said earlier, hold hands and sing the same song and be one team, then the rest of the campus really can collaborate and work together, and there's that trust built from the top. So that's what I would say is, there must be some reasons behind that finding with this. Was that from the College Brain Trust that made that recommendation? There must be some reasonings, and I would want to read and see why that is, why that change seemed to be one that they thought should be made. I think that it's really about how they function and how well they collaborate. And so if collaboration can be made easier because of some top-level collaboration and trust, then that's probably what will make your jobs easier and make more sense. And it may not matter either way. So.
Hi, we have met already today. I'm Brenda Little from the Board of Trustees, and I have a couple questions for you. One has to do with the relationship of the Vice President with the Board of Trustees. And here at LCCC, of course, Dr. Schaefer is our one employee of the board, but we like to have some type of relationship, communicative relationship with the vice presidents also, through Joe, of course. But I'd like to know what your vision or experience is in your relationship with other boards of trustees, and maybe your experience and then the vision that you have of what you'd like to see here. And my second question is going to involve your passion for student services and what really makes your heart ablaze about working with student services.
Okay, well, the first question, my experience with that, because in Montana, the colleges of technology, which really are, that's the journey they're on, is to be perceived as and function as community colleges. And so we didn't have boards of trustees, but we did have what we called a Dean's Advisory Council, and at that college, the dean is the CEO. So those titles are kind of funny to most people outside of Montana. They're funny in Montana too, but and so I have worked with that Dean's Advisory Council, and it functioned as I imagine in terms of communication that I would do in the manner you're talking about. I would come with assigned reporting pieces depending on the topics that were on the agenda and that needed to be talked about, and be able to field those questions. I think that it's very helpful to make sure that the vice president, the president, whoever is interfacing with that board has that information that they can just snap out, instead of saying, great question, I'll go find out and get back to you, because that doesn't accomplish your goals and it wastes people's time. So that would be my goal, is to make sure that I come with the information that is of interest to you. So I would work hard to find out what that is. I have also worked with Montana's Board of Regents, which is the overarching governing body for all of Montana higher education. And so at times I've reported to them, sat on task forces and things like that. So certainly the CEO, the president, is the main contact, and at his behest I would help out with whatever it was that needed to come. So, and then my passion about student services. You know, it was that falling in love with that student that first day that I just found that, number one, I belonged working with adult types of students, because when I was working in K-12, I liked the country school kind of atmosphere, but I wasn't as comfortable in larger school districts, because frankly I didn't really care about all the rules that they wanted me to enforce as a hall monitor. You know, whether the kids had hats on or not, and whether they're, you know, those kinds of things didn't matter to me as much, so I wasn't a great enforcer of those. And I always, too, like to see people as human beings. And so when you work in the adult sphere, you're not so much acting as a parent or a superior to them. I believe that I am kind of shoulder to shoulder with them on their journey, and they teach me as much as I ever learn. And so I just feel like this career for 22 years in higher education working with adult students, that I have gained way more than I've ever given them. And graduation time is a time that I just, I have never attended one of my own graduations, but I would not miss one at my college, because it's just the day that you see these families celebrating this huge accomplishment. When a first-generation student walks across the stage with that gown and that cap on, and that's really the speech. One of the pieces of my job that people may not know that I do is when we have felons that have to go through an alternative admissions process, and they go through that, and then I meet with every one of them. And they probably are treated, I said, they have better connections on campus than anybody else. But my speech with them, because many of them are first-generation students too, and they're coming back with some black marks on their chart, and they're trying. And so I tell them, you know what, it matters more what you do after that hiccup in your road than it matters what you did before. And so right now I want you to visualize yourself walking across the stage with that cap and gown, and with me shaking your hand, and I paint the picture very brightly for them, and I said, if that's my speech to them. And often it makes some hardened criminals cry, because they don't see themselves that way. And so that, to me, there are just hundreds of situations you get into when you're in a community college that you just say, this is almost a holy moment with this student when they are accomplishing something they never dreamt they could.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Jody Wepner. I'm the Justice Studies Coordinator here on campus, and I'm also a member of the advising kind of oversight board
Okay.
called the Bridge Team.
Okay.
Right now at LCCC, we have kind of a dual advising system where most people who come in for the first time see someone in the advising center before they're sent on to their academic advisor. We have some issues, some ongoing issues with advising. Some of it is from the lack of stability in student services and not being able to move ideas forward. But my question for you would be, which type of advising system do you prefer? Which one do you think you would, which types of advising systems have you seen work? Which ones would you support?
Well, I think advising is like retention. It's something that has to fit the institution, and there's not one model that's going to fit every institution, or you can't go get it off a shelf and say, this is the one we're going to do. And so I think it has to grow organically, and it has to be among the agreement of all the players. So I think that, there are various models. Are you a member of NACADA? And so you have that intake, the kind of total intake model where you have student services advising at that front end, and they try to help set a plan together for those students, and then there's a point that you hand them off. Usually after about mid-semester, the first semester, you hand them off to academic advisors. And so are you is the Bridge program part of the academic type of advising, or are you in student services?
I'm in academics. The Bridge
Okay.
team itself is a group of people on campus that, from all different divisions,
Okay, so they're-
that help that serve on the team with the academic advisors from student services.
Fantastic, okay. And so what I think that there's not an easy answer for that. And I see some things that are just kind of truths about advising in higher ed. And one of those is, when you have faculty doing advising, there are some great ones and there are some not so great ones. And another truth is it's very difficult to assess and evaluate. And it usually doesn't count as much as other things. And so faculty who are not naturally great advisors and don't enjoy that can see that, and they behave accordingly. That's a good decision on their part, really, in terms of their job. It doesn't matter so much, so they don't do it as well. And so if you could make everybody a great advisor, that would be fabulous, but you can't. And yet every student deserves a great advisor. The other thing that I don't like about that intake and then handoff process is that there isn't any cohesiveness. And then say I decide at intake that I'm going to be in sustainable energy. But I get in there, and my second semester I decide really what I want to do is welding. And so I get a different advisor when I switch programs. Is that what happens? Okay. So there's no continuity between just advisor to advisor, or then for me as a student, as I'm going through my program, I get a different advisor. They don't know me, and they advise me on classes. But my life as a student matters too. And usually faculty are not as comfortable talking about that as professional advisors, because it's really yucky when you hear that your student didn't come today because she was in jail for having tried to hide her children from their father. I mean, there are terrible stories that happen out there. And a faculty member trying to say, how can I help with that? That's really uncomfortable, and they need help. So we put faculty in a difficult conversation that they're not used to and don't welcome. And then we leave the students sort of sitting out there. Well, we can refer and we can do those things, but it's not as safe of a conversation as it could be if you're talking to your one advisor that you get at intake, and that's your advisor forever, no matter what program you're in and what you decide to do. And they know the most about you, they know your ups and downs, and yet they don't necessarily grade you, because you might have them as a teacher, but you might not. And so they don't have the power academically over you. It's a safe conversation. So I like that about more of the holistic model. And then there's the scalability that you need to assess and decide, do we have enough people? Can we hire enough people? Can we shift some things around? So, you know, you can tell from talking to me that I want that student cared for well all the way through. I want an academic plan, and I want someone who has the relationship with that student to be able to say, you know what, you said you were going to take these 5 classes last semester and then you switched a couple of them. That's not on your plan, and so it's not getting you where you need to go. So you need to talk to me about that more, because you're going to spend a lot more time and money accomplishing this degree if you don't talk to me about that. So that's my preference, I would say. That's my bias is advisors. And then faculty still need to be part of those students' lives. It's not like you say, faculty, now you can't talk to students outside of the classroom. You want all those people still on that student's team and in their corner. So, you know, I see when when you go through a competitive entry process to, say, a health science program or whatever, there are lots of other programs that probably have competitive entry. You still have that advisor that's your go-to person, but you add to it this fabulous faculty advisor, because those program directors in health sciences and whatever the other programs are, they take those students on as their own, and they mark them and say, you're not, you know, that's my student. And so what a wonderful life for a student to have 2 people on campus that really think they're the center of the universe. So I like that. And scalability is an issue, so we have to kind of look at those kinds of things. And maybe you get close to that but not quite there, and that may fit this institution best. So I think it's hard work, and it has to be done. You're welcome.
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first one then is, what is your vision or view of the role, counseling on campus?
Okay, counseling on campus. I think counseling is really an important element for students, because they, especially when you have adult students, but truly any student, stuff happens. Life keeps marching on whether they're a student or not. And this year has been a truly tragic year on our campus. We've had some, I don't know why the stars aligned such that we've had students whose children have died, have been killed. We've had an incredible amount of grief counseling needed. And we have no paid counselors on our staff. So we have a counselor, a clinic in town that gets a counseling intern every year, and they serve until they're done with their counseling hours for their professional license. And so they give us that counselor for free, and that helps them with their hours, and they do the counseling for us. And so it's by appointment, and we have office space for her to use. And we keep her busy. And we have a student body of about 2,500 students, but it has been a horrendous year, and I don't know how our students or our staff would have survived without her. So my hope would be that that college can someday hire a counselor, because it's a need. It's not a want, it's a need. And then there's the other part that I know. I've not been on a campus where we actually had full-time counselors, but what I hear from other colleagues is that there's always that delicate balance of how many times can you see a student without that becoming their main therapeutic arm. And so you have to do some sort of setting of a number of visits per issue or whatever you want to do. And I think that that's a conversation that we have based on the number of visits we have to the center and how much time they have. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that coughing there, but
Yeah.
anyway, the other piece then is the follow-up to that, is we have, I've heard over 400 returning veterans on campus.
Oh,
and I'd
yes.
like to know some of your thoughts about what services or how should we approach the needs of that particular population.
Another great question, and Great Falls, I don't know if you know, is like very, very similar to Cheyenne. We have an Air Force base right there, and it's a missile base, and a lot of young guys, and then we also have the Montana Air National Guard in Great Falls, and so we have a lot of veterans, a lot of active military, and so that's a big deal on our campus too. We're a very military-friendly campus. In my reading about veterans and veterans returning from especially these last couple of wars is that, and I think it's typical of veterans of all wars, and we have all ages on our campus, but they don't immediately come in and say, I need these services, or don't necessarily even identify themselves as veterans, and so you wouldn't know them to see them. But what we have had happen, and I have learned a lot from, is we decided one Veterans Week, and we do some fun things during Veterans Week. We don't do a day, we do a week. And one of our staff members said she'd like to do a kind of a hospitality room for the veterans. Nobody's in there, we just provide food every day, so everybody had a different day that they were bringing some kind of food. And we made sure they had lots of literature in there for all sorts of things that we could get. And then in and out during the day, all that week, different veterans support services from the area would come in and just hang out. And what we found is that veterans would go in there and just hang out, drink coffee, and talk. And through that week of having that opportunity with nobody else really pushing them, they came to me after that and said, we'd really like to have that room all the time. A place that we can just go and be, and you don't have to orchestrate that for us, but if you could find the space, we would just like to do that. So I found some space, and it's not a great space, but it's a space that they can call their own. And they have nested in there and made, all sorts of things. They've got computers in there, they've got tables, they've got food, they've got a little refrigerator, and they've made it a hospitality room. And they run it themselves. And this year we have a Vista coming on board who is going to help with that. And we have dedicated some of the veterans work study to coordinating that too, because veterans helping veterans is what they say in the literature that is really the significant piece. And so that's what we're doing and seems to be working. And the students find themselves, we have the adult basic ed program on our campus, and so students coming through there always know we have this. Some of them come there because they know that we have support for them on campus. And while I don't think it's like enough, it's never going to be enough, it's a great start, and it's their own, and I'm being very attentive to what they say they want and need. And that's something that I think, with people who are suffering any kinds of PTSD or something like that, giving them that control over what support systems they want to see right there, that's working a little bit for them. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, Judy. Rachel with Student Support Services Trio. Financial aid is a huge thing for a lot of students, the majority of our students, and college isn't getting any cheaper anytime soon. So can you talk a little bit about maybe your philosophy on financial aid and helping students be aware of the processes, our local processes for getting scholarships, and then the federal regulations are constantly changing, and how can we help students all of us collectively help them be able to afford school. And then when stuff happens a lot of times, and they still have to follow that financial aid guidelines for schools. So how can you help us do that?
And the rules, as you said, they change, and some of them have become, in some ways, more helpful because they are more like than not like our academic probation types of processes. And so I think it can make more sense to students. They don't have to do something different, for instance, for satisfactory academic progress in financial aid as they do in just the academic area that the registrar's office usually runs with academic probation. So that I kind of like. But literacy about finances is a huge thing. And so we have started to insert that as one of the 4 major things that we spend significant time on in orientation. Every student will get at least an hour and a half of financial literacy. That's not financial aid, that's financial literacy. So budgeting, home finance, what interest rates are, what loans are, all of that stuff. Credit cards, lots of things. And then we have financial aid, which is a whole different deal, and is that accent. But some of the federal rules, our financial aid office historically has not included in their packaging the unsubsidized loans, for instance, because we didn't want them to take those. If they asked, then we'd say, well, there's this other loan pocket that you could access if you want, but students typically will accept all of whatever's packaged for them without a lot of understanding. And so that's, in my opinion, kind of a step backwards, because the federal government now tells us we have to offer everything that they could get. So you have to put everything on the plate. Good idea, bad idea, it doesn't matter. Everything should be offered. That's assuming a financial literacy that a lot of students don't have. So I think that kind of makes it complicated. But I think it's just, this is a perfect example of why student affairs people need to really see themselves as educators. And I think they do. But there's a sophistication and an education that goes with finances that we need to really step up to. And if we can do that and help our students be better consumers of their higher ed dollars, that's going to serve them better, it's going to serve us better, and it's going to serve their completion of degrees better. It really can go hand in hand if we're intentional about that. And that's another one of those areas that is pretty complex, and typically faculty advisors don't know that stuff. That's a level of information that faculty members, for them to all be literate on financial aid rules, and you have to have that discussion at nearly every advising meeting. You need to keep talking about how are finances going and what can you do and how are you, because if they're switching classes and dropping and adding and doing this kind of thing and not accomplishing their goal, there is a very quick and severe punishment in financial aid. They lose their eligibility quicker than they used to. So the rules have changed, and we need to change our educational strategy to adjust to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
One of my passions is the mental health of our students on campus. And I have been digging around with the 4 candidates. Could you tell me if your campus, or if you've been involved, or how you've been involved in, often they're referred to as behavior intervention teams or care teams, which is a bit redundant, but I couldn't. Can you tell me kind of what your experience is and your philosophy about providing that, best practices, that kind of
Yes.
thing? Yeah.
The new term is that behavior intervention team, and we're putting that together formally on our campus right now. But I have always, if you're in disability services, is there anybody here in disability services? If you're in disability services, often people on campus just think you're the one that knows why people act the way they act, okay? And so they'll, I used to be called all the time if someone had a medical emergency on campus. And it's like, I'm not an EMT and not a, I'm not that. Call 911, not Judy. And so that's kind of, I've been part of the behavioral intervention team all of my career, officially or not. And it's a very important piece of what we live in today, because since I started in like 1990, the therapeutic medications have gone more and more sophisticated and enabled more and more people to access higher education than ever before. So we have more people who, their medications may be working for them very, very well, and then they decide, I'm well enough to go to school. And they don't understand, and probably their therapists don't seem to understand, is my experience, that going to school is one of life's major stressors. And so it's going to upset stuff. And so I used to talk all the time with Voc Rehab saying, this is a great student candidate to come to school. Can we start them out at 6 credits? Let's bleed them into school so that they don't have this huge upset. But no, Voc Rehab likes you to go 12 credits. And so that makes that student's life very hard. And it's not helpful for them. So that behavior intervention team, which isn't really talking about that stuff, but it just tells you there's a different mix of people on our campuses than before, and that we need to adjust to that as well. So behavior intervention team is that group that I have worked on, because I'm also, part of my job at the college is the Dean of Students. I'm the disciplinarian and the judicial affairs kind of thing, and the Title IX officer. And so we work that way. We try to get people to report. That's one of the major steps forward. Was this past year we did training on our campus and said every single person on our campus is a mandatory reporter. Don't not talk about stuff you see, and talk about it early enough, because there's no penalty for talking early, and there's a big penalty for saying, oh, it'll go away. Because the other thing that I don't know if you have here, but it's been a dynamic on the campuses I've been on so far, is that faculty teaching adults don't expect them to misbehave in class. And so, and they do. And faculty don't have a lot of training typically in classroom management skills. And so they do interesting things. Some will hope that the crowd controls the behavior, and that never happens. It just gets worse. And so that's when I find out, is when someone has assaulted someone else or something bad has happened. Or they ignore it, or it escalates, and it does escalate. And so my whole theme has been, let's talk about it early so that we don't have people escalate, and we can salvage that student's academic career, salvage your classroom, let everybody keep learning. Because when it gets to that point where something pops out, it's hard to find a win-win at all. Because by that time, the whole class has gotten really irritated at that student and probably at the teacher for not handling it. And we don't need that in our classrooms. So I think there's a lot of education that goes into that behavior management thing too. Do you have a BIT team here?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a care team.
It's care
On
team,
campus,
okay, good.
I think it's in transition. It really needs to be looked at in terms of best practices, and good, the leadership from Vice VP of Student Services.
Yes. On a campus, I've gone on a couple of accreditation visits for our accrediting body, and the one campus that I went and evaluated called it the What's Up team. And it just made it easy for people to say, that's curious, I'm going to call the What's Up team. And it did. I mean, everybody knew what the What's Up team was, whereas the care team might be sort of a secret society, because you don't want to have to explain what that means. But if it's called the What's Up team, you can just talk about whatever, and that's okay. And I understand you're instituting Maxient, or you have that software program. Does anybody understand what that is? And that's a great tool. We're instituting it in Montana as well. We haven't quite gotten to the point of seeing it on campus on anyone's computer, but that's a tool that can be a web reporting. Does everybody understand what that? Have you seen it? So I think that's a great step, and I'm thrilled to see that Wyoming has adopted that kind of with all the community colleges, I think, is that. So good move. In Montana, you may have read in the papers some of the bad press that has come out of some difficulties on the campus with sexual assault and some different things. And so they've become in the spotlight, and the rest of us kind of go, oh, that could be us. And what they've uncovered is kind of that reporting. How do the right people know at the right time to be able to react quickly? And that's what Maxient can do. And I've been pushing that at our schools in Montana, because that gap in knowledge that can delay action for days, weeks, is lethal. And it's a PR nightmare, but it's lethal to the people involved too. So that's the other end of that too. Yeah. The quiet crowd.
May I ask a question that has been asked of the other candidates?
Sure.
But Judy Grado isn't here, but one of her passions is, do I really need a microphone? Is service learning. And so would you please share with us your thoughts of service learning program, what experience you've had with that on the campus?
I've been kind of the champion of AmeriCorps programs on our campus, and believe strongly in it. One of my daughters was in the Montana Conservation Corps, and so went out in the woods for 7 weeks at a time with 10 of her closest friends, and they lived there and worked, and have seen just a real wonderful thing that comes from community service and service to those in our campus communities too. So we've had several versions of service learning on our campus that, in my opinion, haven't really met what I would call service learning. And so we've changed our approach, and I'm hoping that we can get some faculty champions to do some of the service learning in their programs. They do quite a bit, but they don't, like the dental hygiene program. All of the students go every summer up to the northwest corner of the state in the Flathead, where they do a lot of cherry. It's a big cherry orchard area, and they do assessments and teeth cleaning of migrant workers. And so that's an annual thing that they do. Perfect example of service learning. It gives the students a lot of experience, and it's a service to the community, totally free. And there are lots of examples of those. We have the veteran stand-down events, and a lot of our health science programs go and work with that. And so it's a piece of those programs, but they're not looping in the AmeriCorps piece that could be a real accent to the student and a resume builder. And the other thing I would like to see is that we put it into transcription somehow. Some schools will transcript service learning as a specific element of your academic program, and I would like to see that too, because those are things that are meaningful to students, and it's kind of a good record. Because one of the pieces that I look at is all of the wonderful things that we do with students on our campuses, and how can we give them something that reminds them that they did this, because often they forget to put it on their resume. And so when they participate in search committees, for instance, we always have students on committees and on search committees. We should give them a certificate of appreciation for every time they do that. If they are on this search team, Misty should get a certificate saying thank you for your service to the college on this level. And if they are a part of your curriculum committee or whatever committees you have on campus, the end of the year should be a recognition of that. Because students, it's amazing to me how often they just forget what all they did that was not in the classroom. And so service learning is one of those things that is even in the classroom, and yet it's not recorded.
Thank you.
Well, one of the wonderful things that I got in my welcome package was a list of the 10 best places to eat and the 10 best wonderful things to do in Cheyenne. And so that was a really nice touch, and I wanted to thank whoever voted on those things. There were a lot of ties, and then the ones that didn't make the top 10 were also listed, so I really appreciated that. But, yes.
If that's it, well, thank you, Judy, for coming. We appreciate it. And we have a few minutes before your next meeting, so if
Okay.
anyone would like to approach Judy more personally, you're more than welcome to do that. And otherwise,
Okay.
this session, I think, is over. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
all for
everyone.
coming. Oh, another question? Or?
What do you want to know about us? Do you have any questions
Well,
about us?
I have been asking quite a few questions all day and have learned quite a few things, and there are a couple of questions. Should we go off mic or on mic? Okay, because my mom might be tuned in, I don't know. A couple of things that I've been just wanting to get a sense of, because I've looked at your website and I kind of understand how you're organized and what your journey's been with the College Brain Trust coming in and giving you some good recommendations, which has produced you stealing our president and bringing him down here, which was a brilliant move, I have to say. But those kinds of things, how well understood is that all over campus, and are people pretty much bought into that? How does that affect your lives? Anybody care to talk about that? And I can see, I mean, those kinds of things, it's somebody else's recommendations and it's not going to be 100%, oh gosh, we think they're brilliant and we love every minute of their evaluation. But are there things that people are really rallying around? Are there some things on there? Yes, Rachel.
For myself personally, that I've felt a part of the process from the beginning. We had the opportunity to engage with them and give our inputs. And I know that my dean, which is Steve Arto out of business, we keep in contact. So I have felt throughout the process a part of that.
Yeah.
I'm able to at least give my thoughts.
Good,
on
yeah.
that. And as you know from our question, we definitely feel,
Yeah.
I feel that it's been an open process, so.
Good, so you understand it and it's not surprise.
Yeah,
to
and
you.
because the
Yeah.
information's out there, and if you
Good.
want to know more about it, you have those more avenues than ever to be involved.
That's good, that's good.
And through our college council, we have great representation at our college council level as well, and I feel very well represented.
And so what's the college council made up of?
Judy?
The College Council has kind of become a new animal just in the last couple months.
Okay.
It originally was a representative group that had 2 elected representatives from all constituent groups, so
Okay.
that would be administration, faculty, professional staff, educational services staff, and students. And in the brilliant move that we did in stealing your president.
He fixed that, huh?
As you probably know, he's a huge supporter of shared governance, and so the new College Council has 3 representatives from each stakeholder group, as well as pretty much everybody that serves on President's Cabinet, all the vice presidents, and it's going to be more of a it's going to be in that situation much more of a shared governance group where a lot of some of the bigger issues that are going to come through the campus are going to come through that group, and the recommendations are going to be made through this new version of College Council. So
Oh, okay, okay.
It has now become the primary shared governance group on campus.
And I am familiar with a group similar to that, yeah, yeah.
Judy, as far as the Board of Trustees is concerned, we took that organizational audit and the College Brain Trust recommendations very, very seriously.
Yes.
And they had some very specific recommendations
Okay.
for the Board of Trustees, which we took very seriously
Oh, okay.
and are doing. One of those was to go through our policies, which is where you met us this morning, was John and I and Joe working on those.
Great.
So
Yeah.
we felt that if we wanted experts to come in and give us advice, that we better look.
You should probably take it, yeah.
Yeah, or have a good reason not to.
Right.
So, we're taking it very seriously. And we have a lot of discussions with Joe about the recommendations of the College Brain Trust. We call Dr. Boggs still fairly regularly and say, what are your thoughts about this? And we plan to do that about some of our policy issues. So
That's great.
We were very pleased with it.
Yeah.
And the recommendations in there made sense. At the end, they had some different org structure recommendations. I think there were three different recommendations, and we talked
pretty extensively as a board about those.
Great.
And at the same time, Joe was coming in, and we knew he had some definite ideas about what he wanted to do with that too.
Mhm.
So we rely a lot on Joe too.
That's great.
And asked him for his
Yeah.
vision on a lot of those and how he wanted to carry those out.
That's great. And your final comment is exactly it. You have the recommendations, but how they're carried out
Yeah.
is really the work to be done here. And that's where you have your influence as employees of the institution, is how does that really take on its character? Because implementation is everything. Recommendations are kind of nice, and you can see why, but then how it is implemented is pretty much the organic piece of it that we all have to do, and that's the work. But that's great. That's great. And I think some of those kinds of changes, they talk a lot about change management, and a lot of the change management books and gurus would say, you do this one thing and you do that well, and that's a lot of change for people. But sometimes you find also that you can't just do one of them and it be successful, because you have these other things that are all dominoes around it. And so you end up having to do a lot of things at once, and that's a challenge for everybody involved, because not everybody's real excited about any kind of change, and not everybody's excited about jumping into that unknown. And we've done that on our campus. We ended up having about 12 things that we were doing at the same time. But we as a campus looked at them and said, if we're going to take advising off a faculty's plate, that's a major change on a campus. And so what are they going to do in place of that, or how are we going to make that trade? Because student services folks were going to take on the advising piece, and the faculty were going to take on then the academic support systems. So tutoring centers and supplemental instruction, those kinds of things. And so we felt, and that was our decision, we felt that made sense, because if there was any kind of a barrier between student and academic affairs for students to be able to access the Learning Center or supplemental instruction to happen, we wanted to erase that. So put all those tools in the faculty realm so that they get the power and the authority to make it what they need to. And I would tell you that those switches, they're not ones you can say, let's try this for a while, because they're such big changes. You've got to be committed to them. And then you find out a year later, you all withhold your opinion until you've been in it for a year, and then look back and say, was this a good idea? Was this not a good idea? And what I would say is those two big changes that we made were very good ideas, because the students are very well served. We can see very tangible product that the students now have in their hands. Every single student now has a full academic plan before they register for their first class. And every time they decide they want to change a class, they check with that advisor, and they erase what they're doing, and they readjust things and see how it's going to affect them, so they aren't making decisions in a vacuum. And the faculty have been working a lot. They've been going to a lot of professional development to really understand what academic support systems really can be. And they're making their mark on that. And you have to, when you do that, you have to kind of step back and say, yeah, I've been doing that Learning Center for a long time, and I really love it, and I think it's great the way it is. And you have to step back and say, it's now yours. And so make it something different if you wish to, and then support them in that. So that's that kind of, students sit in the middle of us, and we need to all be really working on that same team so that they can see that, they have this big, wonderful family. And they'll come back and work for us someday. Anything else? I'm going to turn the mic off, and then I'm happy to stick around if anybody wants to talk one-on-one or whatever. But thank you so much for coming. This has been delightful for me, and I hope for you. Yes? Okay. Oh gosh, several things. One is I have looked at Wyoming. All of us in Montana look at Wyoming as the place that makes sense, because you have one university and you have these community colleges. And I understand that there's probably a story behind the story, and it's not every day is lollipops and kittens, but that's one of those things. But that's one of the things, is I was looking at that. I would like to work for a bigger college, and I like a challenge, and I like change, and I've been able to effect a lot of change at my college, but I have also built a very, very strong team of leaders in student services, and I feel like they're ready for me to get out of the way and let them do what they do. And I believe fully that there are 2 or 3 of them that could step up in my place now, and the college would be very well served. So that's one of those things. It's good to leave at the right time. And another one is that Joe is here, and he has been like my favorite boss in the world, and so I would love to have the opportunity to work for him again, because he drives forward and does marvelous things, and it's always great to be on a team that's doing that. And then on a personal note, you know, Cheyenne's very similar to Great Falls. It's very Montana-y, and I like that. And you're close to Denver, which is a quicker flight to Pennsylvania. And, you know, I have parents that are very hale and hearty, and they are like 82 and 85 now, and they're doing great. But they won't need me for some years yet, and so this is kind of a time when I feel like I can go and do that without even any kind of guilty conscience. I have sisters and I have a big family, and there are lots of people around there to do whatever is needed up there. I'm not needed. So it's kind of an exciting thing, and I feel a lot of freedom to do this. My husband sold his business in Helena and now drives trucks in his kind of post-retirement type of a thing, and he can do that just about anywhere and is happy to. So. It's kind of a long answer, but there's a lot to like about Cheyenne.
Where's your new grandchild going to be?
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, so you're far away from there.
Yes, but it's easier to get any place from Denver than it is from Great Falls, or anywhere in Montana. It's just, you have to go to Seattle. Or my original flight was going to go to Minneapolis before I came down here, so yeah, it makes sense. Well, thank you very much, and you all have a nice afternoon.